The city of Tacoma may soon lose hundreds of shelter beds for people experiencing homelessness. The funding for nearly 400 beds is ending next year. Tacoma Bureau Chief Connor Board is live for us in front of City Hall with details. Connor, why exactly is this happening?
Jessica, city leaders here inside Tacoma City Hall say that the shelters that are at risk of closing only had temporary funding, and now the need for those shelter beds is still there, but the money is not. This is a place people come for help.
We have 135 shelters here for people that have been chronically homeless.
A place people come to build a better future.
Over 100 people in the last couple of years have moved from here into permanent housing out of homelessness, which is fantastic.
The Forging Paths shelter opened 2.5 years ago and houses people in tiny houses and tents. It's run by the Tacoma Rescue Mission and is operated in partnership with the city of Tacoma.
We have funding with the city for another 6 months until July, and then right now the funding will end.
When the funding ends, so may the shelter.
If we don't get any funding right now, we'll have to shut down.
He expects around 30 people will move into permanent housing before then, but not everyone.
The 130 plus here, we won't be able to find places for all of them in that timeline.
This shelter is not the only one at risk of closing. 7 temporary and emergency homeless shelters will lose their funding next year, which will create a loss of nearly 400 shelter beds.
There's going to be a gap at this point, a pretty significant gap of beds available in the community.
Currently, right now, the city has a shelter funding gap of about $9 to $12 million.
Of the 7 shelters, city leaders say one is closing because of changes of service, and the other, a church, was only a temporary shelter space. But the city says the 5 other shelters are needed to keep up with the increasing number of people experiencing homelessness.
And those are really important because they are different types of models in terms of how they shelter, and they're certain types of demographics that are really important in terms of interventions that we need and help support.
The city hopes to secure state funding to sustain 307 beds, which some say is crucial.
I am hoping the state will come through and help at least somewhat, because it'll be a really big drop-off really suddenly if this all happens this year.
The city says they are actively working to make a plan to ask state leaders for funding in the upcoming legislative session to try to keep some of the shelters open. Jessica.
Yeah, Connor, in your story, someone mentioned a big drop-off if these don't stay open. So give us some perspective. Is this a large chunk of the shelter beds available in Tacoma?
Well, the city of Tacoma operates around 1,100 shelter beds. So with this, that would mean that more than 30% of the shelter beds could go away if that funding is not secured. Back to you, Jessica.
Yeah, that's a pretty significant amount. Connor Board reporting live for us from Tacoma. Thanks, Connor.